Oh, hey, welcome back. Today we're looking at one of my personal favorite episodes, the Post-Modern Prometheus. Debuting November 30th, 1997, the Post-Modern Prometheus takes our agents to a small town where a local legend known as the Great Mutato resides. The episode sets the tone from the very get-go when it transitions from a comic book to the real world. Izzy and his buddies are heading to a comic book convention, which I'm going to assume actually has comics because it's the 90s and hasn't been taken over by Hollywood just yet. While Izzy's off with his friends, his mother Shayna watches only the classiest of TV shows, Jerry Springer, though it appears as if she isn't alone.
I can't believe this.
I think the question the audience really wants answered is,
This must be a really good episode because she's completely unaware that her home is being tented, and whoever's inside is grilling what looks like a hockey puck. Finally, she realizes something isn't quite right. But damn lady, your lack of self-awareness is very concerning. I don't know if it's the smoke, the monster, or the blaring music from Cher that got her attention, but I think it's a little too late. Sometime later, Shayna writes to the agents about her experience. However, this doesn't appear to be the first time this has happened. 18 years prior, she had a similar thing happen with Cher blasting, smoke, a monster, and her waking up pregnant with her son Izzy. And now all this time later, the same thing has happened.
I got your name off the TV. Some lady on the Jerry Springer show who had a werewolf baby said you came to her house.
So you can basically make up any crazy story, and Mulder will make a house call apparently. I wonder if the same thing works with Scully.
Mrs. Berkowitz, you said that you also had a son?
Easy. That's him there.
Wait, which one's Izzy? After Shayna's first encounter, she told the police what happened, but there was no investigation because reasons, I guess. This second time though is a little stranger, because after an operation left her unable to bear any more children, she somehow got pregnant again, which should be impossible, but this is the X-Files. Shayna shows the agents the pan they cooked the hockey puck on, and the nearly empty jar of peanut butter they devoured in her fridge. Who leaves peanut butter in the fridge?
Somebody set a tumbler here and didn't use no coaster.
Shayna appears to be a master ventriloquist. While Shayna gushes over Mulder being an expert on UFOs, Scully checks out the mess that is Izzy's room and finds a comic book featuring a monster that matches the exact description of the monster that Shayna claims she saw. Strangely, this Great Mutato is a character her son created, so it couldn't be him. Izzy gets home from his convention and explains that he's seen the Great Mutato as well. In fact, everyone in town has. So now it's time for a little monster hunting. Apparently peanut butter sandwiches are all that's needed to trap this monster.
Daytime talk shows and tabloid headlines have become a reality against which they measure their lives.
Scully appears to be a master ventriloquist as well. Also, why is she talking so loudly about the case within earshot of this kid? The sandwich seems to work because just like that, the Great Mutato appears. How the hell did he know there would be a peanut butter sandwich waiting for him? And how the hell does he outrun Mulder when he can barely hobble away? Instead of the Great Mutato, they find an old farmer who might just know where their monster is.
I'll show you the monster you're looking for.
who sent you here? Are you an assassin?
The farmer leads them to his son, a deranged scientist Dr. Polidori, who thinks he can play God by creating bizarre flies with legs growing out of their mouths, and God knows what else. Mulder questions the man if the same thing can be done to a human, to which Polidori suggests in theory, but it would sort of be frowned upon by the scientific community.
Mulder, even if they could, no scientist would even dare to perform these kind of experiments on a human.
I don't know, Scully, scientists have done some pretty messed up things over the years. While Scully scoffs at the idea of these experiments being performed on humans, Mulder on the other hand thinks that it could be a possibility, because, well, it's Mulder. At Dr. Polidori's house, he and his wife argue about having children before he leaves town. She wants children and he wants a Nobel Prize. Why they didn't discuss this before getting married, I'm not sure. Dr. Polidori leaves, but it looks like his wife just might get her wish. What's with all the flowers in her bedroom though? It looks like a funeral. The following morning, the agents arrive at the local diner and it seems like Mulder is Mr. Popular. Either that or everyone has a thing for him. Meanwhile, Scully grabs what might be the strangest newspaper I've ever seen. The article on the right has the same first paragraph written 3 times, and the article on the left is written in gibberish or something.
I'd just like some coffee. Thanks.
On the house. Compliments of JJ.
That's with 2 J's.
Hey, what's Joey Fatone doing here? Scully comes in telling Mulder that everything they talked about the previous night was leaked to the paper, which is why the townsfolk are so interested in Mulder. Maybe next time don't talk about top secret FBI business in front of a kid with a recorder? Izzy gets chewed out by his mother for being a little snoop, but yet he somehow managed to record the Great Mutato the night his mother got knocked up while he was off at the comic convention. Maybe the Great Mutato hit the record button? In the meantime, the Great Mutato was having a great time at Dr. Polidori's place.
Mulder, I'm alarmed that you would reduce this man to a literary stereotype. A mad scientist.
Who else would go to such trouble to impregnate Shana Berkowitz?
Okay, ouch, Mulder. She might not be your cup of tea, but I'm sure there's a guy out there that would find her attractive. As the agents are driving, Mulder notices something kind of odd. Shana said something about disappearing for 3 days and no one realizing she was gone. Well, there happens to be a house covered with a fumigation tent, and that immediately sets off an alarm in his head. It looks like he's right too, because we've got a house full of gas and Cher blaring throughout. Why are they going into a house full of gas without any kind of respirator though? You'd think at least Scully would realize that this isn't the smartest idea.
Come on. Get up. Move.
These two idiots get knocked out cold, and see? Even the creepy old farmer knows to wear a respirator. Uh-oh, does this mean Mulder and Scully are gonna wake up pregnant? No, but they do wake to a very confused Dr. Polidori. What the hell is with all the flowers in their home? I really need to know. Mulder suggests that Polidori's wife may have been impregnated, and she seems to be pretty happy about this news. She doesn't even question how or why. She really just wants to be pregnant, I guess. Oh my god, look how little Scully is! Scully thinks that this is all an elaborate hoax for publicity or something. The worst part is the Great Mutato appears to have eaten all their peanut butter too. Well, this is an interesting development. It appears as though the Great Mutato is the son of the old farmer, but how does that happen? Did he hook up with Mama Peacock?
You wouldn't.
Why? Because I can.
Well, this is awkward. Seems Polidori's wife may have been impregnated by Polidori's father, the old farmer. Talk about keeping it in the family. Back at the diner, and for some reason, all the townsfolk hate Mulder.
What's this?
Compliments of JJ.
How could you, Joey Fatone? You were Mulder's favorite member of NSYNC. The townsfolk have all turned on the agents because, once again, something they said was printed in the paper, this time claiming the town's monster is a hoax. These two really need to be careful who they talk around. Izzy gets himself in some hot water when he's caught with a monster mask, which throws the entire town into hysteria, because they now believe that Izzy has been messing with them this whole time. On the flip side, Scully thinks that there is something more going on, because the hockey puck that was fried at each crime scene is some chemical used to knock out farm animals, and in order to even possess this chemical, you'd have to be registered with the FDA. Unfortunately, the only person in town that's registered also happens to be dead at the moment. Poor disgusting Mutato buries his father, who was really the only one he had in his life. The agents arrive at the old farmer's place but enter the barn before going inside his home, which is kind of odd. Mulder discovers the hockey puck and the shallow grave of the old farmer.
Who are you?
I'm with the newspaper.
What's your business here?
The old man was murdered.
They should know who this woman is, no? She was at Polidori's place when they were found unconscious. The reporter tells the agents she saw Mutato burying his father in the barn. Just then, the show goes full Frankenstein when the townsfolk come bearing torches looking for the monster.
No, there's no justice like angry mob justice.
Polidori claims the monster is the murderer, but we all know who the real monster is. The townsfolk are all incredibly stupid. They rush into an old wooden barn full of hay and who knows what other flammable material, and it goes about how you'd expect. Scully notices Mutato trying to take a peek from the cellar doors. God, he is just awful at hiding. When they head inside, they find his shrine dedicated to Cher, which is a little odd, but he is a monster, so I'll let it slide.
The barn's on fire!
I really expected nothing less from this group. I don't really care if the people burn, I'm more so worried about the animals. The agents and Mutato poke their heads out to see what the commotion is all about and are immediately spotted. Good job protecting Mutato from the crazed mob. Polidori drops a bombshell when he reveals that his father created Mutato. But how? He was nothing more than a simple farmer.
25 years ago, my father, having only one son.
Oof, Mutato is 25? That's a rough 25. The old man didn't actually create Mutato. His son Dr. Polidori did. The old man simply saved Mutato and raised him as his own. The old man did, however, try and create a mate for Mutato by impregnating women around the town using science that he himself had very little understanding of. The best part about this whole thing is that it suggested that many of the townsfolk are the product of the animals found at the old man's farm. That pig we saw earlier with Izzy could be his father.
But who's the father?
See, I told you. Mutato goes on about what they did was wrong and he'll take the blame for his father's murder. Mutato is arrested, but so is Dr. Polidori, though I'm not sure why Dr. Polidori is arrested. He's never actually outed as the murderer, though he did perform some science that I'm gonna assume is illegal. Things get sort of meta here when Mulder suggests that this isn't how the story is supposed to end. The monster is supposed to get away to find his bride, so Mulder asks to speak to the writer, who's Izzy. This here basically tells me that none of this is real and was all simply made up, a fictional tale set within the world of the X-Files. The episode then ends in the best way imaginable, as the agents escort Mutato to see Cher. Yes, Mutato might be hideous, but even a monster can't resist a little Cher. The agents even get in on the action a bit in a moment that I'm sure sent a few shippers into a coma. The Post-Modern Prometheus is one of my all-time favorite episodes, and surprisingly, it was written by Chris Carter, who I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with. Let me get this out of the way quick because it always gets brought up, but yes, the whole medical rape thing is a bit weird. It is strange that these women who were impregnated without their consent are seemingly happy that it occurred. But regardless, I still can't help but love this episode. I love the quirky characters, the small town setting, the homage to Frankenstein, and the Mad Doctor movies of the 1950s. This one is so unique and stands out from all the others. Part of this can be attributed to the black and white color scheme used to give the episode a dreamlike feeling. I think the comic book opening and ending were done on purpose to let the audience know that this was something different, and likely something that wasn't really part of the show's canon story. Did this story actually happen, or was it just a creation from Izzy or Chris Carter himself? I think the fact Mulder mentions that he wants to speak to the writer is all the evidence that I need to say that this is just a fantasy story set inside the world of the X-Files. The events that take place never actually occur. There is no Mutato, there is no mad scientist creating babies using the genes from animals. It's all just a silly story created for a comic book. My favorite part is honestly the ending with Mutato at the Cher concert. I'm not going to go into why the ending is so meaningful to me, but it kills me every time I watch it. Like I mentioned, the story was written by Chris Carter, and his original intentions were to have Cher actually appear. Cher was a big fan of the show and always wanted to be a part of it. Chris Carter wrote the story with the intentions of having Cher show up at the end, but unfortunately because of scheduling conflicts, Cher was unable to. She did, however, allow Chris Carter to use her music, and instead Cher impersonator Tracy Bell took on the role. There was always an understanding that one day Cher would make a guest appearance on the show, but it sadly never came to pass. There was always an unwritten rule with the X-Files that when it came to guest stars, they didn't want to have anyone too recognizable, but with how hard they tried to get Cher, that rule seemed to go out the window. Not only did they try to get Cher, but they had Jerry Springer on the TV when Shayna was watching in the beginning, and again at the end when she had her mutated monster baby. These segments were shot specifically for this episode, even though some claim that the first part with the werewolf baby actually came from the Jerry Springer show. The third guest star, John O'Hurley, was another fairly recognizable face, as he was a side character on the wildly popular show Seinfeld at the time. So again, if the idea was to have actors that weren't recognizable, then they went about it the wrong way. There was actually set to be another guest star that was originally offered the role of Shayna, and that was Roseanne Barr. Roseanne was also a big fan of the show and wanted to have a guest role. Chris Carter wrote the role of Shayna with Roseanne specifically in mind, but again, because of scheduling conflicts, she was unable to do it. I myself prefer when the show uses less recognizable faces for their casting, but Roseanne could have been interesting as Shayna. Watching how Patty Tierce plays the character, I can kind of picture how Roseanne might have done it, but I like Patty and I don't think it would have been the same. As far as the connection to Frankenstein goes, it's pretty on the nose. For one, the name, the Post-Modern Prometheus, is a direct connection to the title of the Frankenstein book, which most people don't realize is actually called Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Dr. Polidori's name was taken from the physician Dr. John Polidori, the personal doctor to Lord Byron. Lord Byron was a British poet and the man who suggested that Mary Shelley, her husband Percy, Polidori, and himself have a contest to see who can write the spookiest ghost story. Long story short, but Mary Shelley, who wasn't really considered a real writer at the time, ended up winning the contest, and Frankenstein has gone on to be one of the most influential pieces of science fiction and horror literature ever written. Chris Carter grew up loving the Frankenstein movies as a kid, and he always wanted to do something that would move him as much as those did growing up. His idea was to come up with a story that would blur the lines between what was real and what was fantasy. The season 5 mythology episodes were going to be hitting more dramatic marks this season, so he needed something that would be a bit sillier and help lighten the mood. The idea was to create his very own Frankenstein-style story, but set in a more modern setting and using modern science. He eventually settled on a story about a monster looking for a mate with a weird obsession for Cher. Like mentioned earlier, the show always had one rule about not hiring recognizable faces. However, Carter decided to abandon this rule because it would help make it feel more fantastical. In the end, it didn't really matter anyways because the two main names they wanted both had to decline. If you pay attention and listen, you might recognize the voice of Mutato, because, well, he's played by Chris Owens, the actor that portrayed the younger cigarette-smoking man in Season 4's Musings of a Cigarette-Smoking Man, and who will be showing up later in Season 5 as Jeffrey Spender. Chris Owens spent 5 to 7 hours each day having all the appliances and animatronics applied to him every single morning before the shoot, with the final costume and all the makeup costing roughly $40,000. The episode was well liked by most that watched it when it came out. Jillian said that it was one of her highlights of the entire series. And in 2000, when David was promoting his movie Return to Me, he said that his favorite image of the past 7 years was the ending with him and Jillian slow motion dancing in black and white. This episode was also nominated for 7 Emmy Awards, winning 1 for Outstanding Art Direction. The Post-Modern Prometheus currently sits at 8.5 on IMDb. This is one of my all-time favorites, and I'm probably going to give it a 9. Up next, we have a very different episode as a young girl comes into Scully's life who may be her deceased sister's daughter in Christmas Carol. So what do you think of the Post-Modern Prometheus? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope I see you in the next one, and stay spooky!
The X-Files presents a black and white horror tale.
Up there!
With a monster, a mad scientist, and an angry mob. Could it get any scarier than this?
Is it true Jerry Springer's coming to town?
An all-new X-Files, Sunday at 9, 8 Central. So many mysteries, just one Fox.